Spoilers for what today's
Right.
episode is called. All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of my weird little podcast where we talk about all things weird. Of course, it's me, Tia, your wonderful podcaster, and Patrick, that guy over there who does everything else. um, let's just get into the story. Today's story is about the 1994 Zimbabwe UFO sighting and alien encounter. So, Pat, have you heard anything like about the story before at
Uh,
all?
I had just seen the video clip. If we're talking about the same story, yeah, I'd seen.
Yeah, there's several video clips
Yeah,
of
I think I
from
first
this
saw it on like
encounter.
TikTok or something. Then you showed me again. But yeah, it's really weird. I mean,
Yeah.
just seeing kids talk like that was weird.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's always weird when kids take things super serious that you're like, that shouldn't exist, but you're describing something really accurately.
Yeah. So for those listeners who have not heard the story, basically a bunch of kids had an encounter at recess where they believed that an alien came to visit them, and these kids were interviewed after the incident because it gained so much attention, because all of these kids stories were consistent, very consistent, to the point where they could not be lying because they're so consistent with everything that they say.
Mhm.
So that's a little bit about the story. I'll get into more details in a moment here. First off, what are you drinking?
Um, I guess the last of this coffee. I'm not.
Oh yeah,
I don't let coffee go to waste.
how boring. I'm drinking coffee too. I have a pink mug for those who are just listening. I need to get like themed mugs for these episodes, I think, because
That's
I'm
fair.
always drinking something, and most of the time it's going to be coffee now because we're recording these in the daytime as opposed to when we were recording them at night, and I was always drinking LaCroix.
That's hilarious. And I was always
Or
drinking LaCroix with tequila in it.
yeah, sometimes, or wine. But honestly, I feel like I drink LaCroix more than anything else. Mostly just because I want a sponsorship.
Let's say we never got any
From
information from them.
LaCroix.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Croy, if you are out there,
Monsieur Croix.
um, I would like that sponsorship. Also, not to be creepy, but if you're wondering what I'm wearing, follow my TikToks. Follow my TikToks if you're wondering. These will be up on YouTube eventually, but I try to put together cute outfits, at least I am now. And some way, in a way, I'm promoting it through TikTok because I'm trying to get more listeners. So I am putting together cute outfits themed for every episode, and I am putting together the outfit on TikTok, and hopefully that will bring us more listeners. If not, they're just fun to do because I love to put on clothes, and I've got some pretty cute things in my closet that I've collected over the years, and I might as well show them off and hopefully get more traffic to this podcast. So that is what I'm doing. So if you like fashion, follow me on TikTok. So
Hmm.
um not that like I'm super into fashion, like everything I wear is like, I mean, I guess, I have my own style, but I'm not like, this is this, I don't know, I'm not like specific on things, but most of my stuff is from the dollar store or from Goodwill. So, you know, occasional Amazon buys. I will always be wearing this necklace that I bought drunk at the Rio with Roxana. Shout out to Roxana, our fellow podcaster. For those who are listening, this necklace is a knockoff Vivienne Westwood, her famous globe, and a safety pin with fake rhinestones on it. It's missing some rhinestones because I wear it all the time. But I didn't know who Vivienne Westwood was before I bought this. And I'm so glad that I learned who she was because she just passed away recently. And it opened up my mind to appreciating and understanding fashions that I had already been wearing in in my repertoire of fashion, but having like further understanding of the history and the culture of like where this came from. And I'm gonna go off on a little rant here, but I do think people should look into fashion history more often, because it really has a lot to do with the history of socioeconomics, the history of war, of women's rights, the class system. Like everything has something to do with fashion. Fashion influenced history, and history influences fashion. It's like so fascinating when you get into it, and that's like 90% of what I watch on TikTok now. So hopefully when I become more educated, I can incorporate that into my TikToks. But for now, I'm just putting on cute outfits together from my closet, which is okay too. Like, doesn't have to be all that serious, you know, especially on TikTok, But those who do create serious TikToks that are extremely educational, I commend you and I respect you, and I'm probably following you. So yeah. And if not, email me and let me know what your TikTok is, because I want to follow you. And yeah, anyways, back to the story. So let's just get into it. Sorry, I got a burp. Take one more sip of my coffee. All right. And we'll get into the story. So I don't remember where I heard this story. I think this was when I was doing some research, maybe for Hollywood's Haunted, the podcast, on I can't even remember that one story where that lady like literally was abducted from her room and people saw her floating outside of her building.
Oh
I
yeah.
cannot remember what that story was, but I feel like I came across this. I also do a lot of searches of like top 10 UFO sightings, top 10 alien encounters, top 10 ghosts, whatever, just because those lists are usually, there's some that, are the same stories that come up all the time, but occasionally I'll come across a list with a story that I've never heard. And, it'll spark my interest, and it can be something that I want to make a podcast about. So I think I came across this somehow through that. Um, but most of my information today is from thegazette.net and the Mile Higher podcast. If you don't listen to the Mile Higher podcast or watch them on YouTube, please check them out. They are fascinating, fantastic. What am I saying? It is fascinating.
Yeah, I was about to say, it can be
They're
both.
great. Kendall Ray is, and I feel so bad that I don't know her husband's name. It's his podcast too. But if you are listening to this, you probably know who Kendall Ray is. But her podcast that she does with her husband, they're fantastic together, and it's called Mile Higher. And yeah, you should check it out. So I got most of this information from them, and they have a lot of video as well from this story, which is the 1994 Zimbabwe UFO sighting. It's also known as the Ariel phenomenon, because Ariel is the name of the school that this took place in. So we'll get into it then. So this takes place in the town of Rua. It is a town in Harare, Zimbabwe. It's a Harare metropolitan province, Zimbabwe. It is situated 22 kilometers southeast of the capital, Harare, on the main Harare Mutar highway and railway line. So it is a very small city, and it is in a very rural area. It is on the very edge of basically like the county. So on the edge, it's basically beyond the school goes into more wilderness and tall grass. And, I don't know. I've never been to Africa, but I imagine that there are vast places that are untouched. So it's on the very edge of civilization into wilderness. Rua serves as a small administrative and trading center for the surrounding mixed farming areas. In recent years, it has grown rapidly and has become a popular area for people moving out of Herrera. So most of this takes place at the Ariel Primary School, which I will get into a little bit more about that, which the school is situated on the edge of Rua, right where basically like the playground goes off. There's a part of the playground where the kids are told they can't go beyond because then they're in the wilderness. Basically,
That's crazy.
You know, there's not like a fence around the school. It's just like, don't go beyond there because there could be wild animals beyond there. So, and I imagine children going to private school in Africa are probably pretty well behaved, especially seeing the interviews of these children. Like, they're very smart.
Yeah, they seem pretty well spoken.
I imagine like kids, any children, any kids or children outside of the US are probably really well behaved. Not saying that kids in the US aren't well behaved, but no comment on that. You know, having worked in entertainment and tourism and seeing parents from all around the world bring their children to things that are not meant for children and hoping that they behave, and then seeing different parenting styles. I have a lot of opinions, but they're also from an opinion of someone who doesn't have kids. So, you know, take that as you will. You know, so anyways, back to the story. September 14th, 1994, at around 9 p.m., people around South Africa, which I guess if you don't know, Zimbabwe is in the area of South Africa. I guess I should know geography better, but people around South Africa reported seeing large bright object in the sky. Some reported seeing one object that looked like a bright star. Other people reported seeing multiple objects moving together. ZBC radio and BBC were flooded with calls of people seeing a white fireball in the sky. Oh, and if you don't know, South Africa has a large population of British people. So yeah, BBC, that's why they would have contacted BBC.
Okay.
And if you want me to go into the history of white South Africans and why British people are there, that is a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, I was about to say that's a different episode.
A whole other podcast. You know what? Watch The Color of Friendship. That'll answer it all.
Oh God, yeah, that's true.
I'm just kidding. But do watch The Color of Friendship because it's fantastic, not for a history lesson. But yes, there is a big British population in South Africa, and one of the main languages is English in South Africa because of this, which is also why you'll find a lot of these videos of these children are, you know, in English, and why many of these children are white as well. But I'll get into that in a minute. So if you're confused and you're like, hey, I thought this was in Africa, like it is, you know. So BBC. So the BBC and CBC were flooded with calls of people seeing a white fireball in the sky. First reports were from an airport in Johannesburg, and then other reports started coming from further away, Botswana and Zambia. The object was visible in the sky for 10 to 12 minutes, reported to be the size of a jumbo Boeing 747. Some said it was too big to be a plane, or some said it was a fiery object with multiple objects following it like sparks, but traveled at the speed of a plane and made no noise as it passed. Astronomers and scientists suspected that it was an asteroid burning up as it entered the Earth's atmosphere, or possibly a meteor shower. Although some witnesses interpreted the fireball as a comet or a meteor, it resulted in a wave of UFO mania in Zimbabwe at the time. According to skeptic Brian Dunning, the fireball had been the re-entry of the Zenit 2 rocket from the Cosmos 2290 satellite launch. The booster broke up into burning streaks as it moved silently across the sky, giving an impression of a light show to millions of Africans. So basically, he thinks it's part of this satellite. Local UFO researcher Cynthia Hind, who we'll get into a little bit more, recorded other alien sightings at the time, including a daylight sighting by a young boy and his mother, and a report of alien beings on a road by a trucker. So yes, this light could be part of a satellite, but that does not explain these humanoid alien creatures that people saw later on, or what happened at the Ariel primary school. So we'll get into that a little bit now. So the Ariel primary school is in Rua. It's a private elementary school. It's on the border of the city, where it becomes much more rural area, mostly agricultural. One of the most expensive private schools in the area. Many of the kids were of British or South African descent, although some of the students were from wealthy families in Harare, but who didn't want to send their children to the crowded city school. It is a diverse school population. And the official language of the school was English. So a few days later after this first sighting, so the first sightings of the ball in the sky was September 14th. But this all takes place on September 16th. So 2 days later, 250 children went out to recess at 10 a.m. While the children played, the adult faculty members were inside having a staff meeting. And the only adult outside was a volunteer worker who was actually a parent of one of the kids who went to the schools there. They were running the snack bar. They call it the tuck shop. So if I refer to it as a tuck shop, it's basically a snack bar, yeah. So about 30 minutes into the recess, the children started to point at something in the sky. Children started to grab their friends and ask them if they could see the object. They would later describe the object as a maroon disc, bright and unlike anything they had ever seen before. A small group of children started to gather around the boundary of the schoolyard. So like I said, just at the very edge of the yard where they have recess, it kind of goes off into more of a wilderness area where there is tall grass, and it would be hard to see the children beyond that point, which is why they're not allowed to go beyond that point. And it also could potentially be dangerous. So, but these kids start to gather towards the edge of the schoolyard. So they started staring at the bushland beyond the school boundary that they were not allowed to go because of wildlife and snakes and So the bush and grass outside of the schoolyard was tall and thick. So this craft or maroon disc landed just outside of the schoolyard. It was described to make a whirring noise. That's what they said. I don't know what they mean by whirring. I'm guessing to me, that sounds like a pretty typical Mars attacks type of alien, maybe the noise that we made in the beginning of this.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. That's funny.
So yeah, it was made this I guess kind of like a whistle-y noise. So the children described not only seen the craft, but a creature too. So a few of the kids went out to where the maroon disc had landed, and they described seeing a shiny silver house made of glass, like a silver light. Um, and they stared at it and they heard like a flute sound. And then they saw a black figure running at them in slow motion. And many of the kids describe it as seeing this figure in slow motion, is how they describe it. And, you know, it's weird that they all use that term slow motion, you know, and it scared the children. So some of them ran over to the tuck shop and they told the mother of the working there and the volunteer that what they saw, and they reported seeing a small man walking around with a band around his head and like a one-piece black suit. And the mother of the shop didn't believe them, you know, and
Right.
like understandably,
Right.
like
Yeah.
you know,
That's not like
uh,
Timmy pushed me or something.
yeah, she didn't believe them. She thought that they were making this up to get her to leave the tuck shop so that they could steal snacks or money. Um, you know, and as a parent, it's like, you know, very easy to have this like sort of one track mind. You know, you're always thinking of, you know, many things at one time, and uh kids can get hysterical, or you know, so she doesn't believe them, you know. And so uh so some of the kids actually go towards the being and the craft, and the children describe uh it one some of okay so some of the children describe one ship with small ships around it, and that multiple beings emerge from the craft. Now they were described to have big eyes 6 times the size of a human eye, small nose or no nose at all, and a tiny mouth, and they could barely see that it had ears. So it sounds like a very typical gray alien, that you know, your quote unquote, you know, I don't know, the grays, you know, which is like the stereotypical cartoon alien that we normally see,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, which maybe these kids would be familiar with that, you know. These were wealthier kids and this was the 90s, so they probably watched television. So you do need to keep that in mind. Um, so some of the kids described it wearing all black, that it had long hair and pale gray skin. And these kids thought it was the Tokoloshe, which is in Zulu mythology. In Zulu mythology, the Tokoloshe, and I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing this wrong, is like this dwarf water sprite, and it is like a mischievous evil spirit, and it can you know, cause you to have troubles, you know. So a lot of these kids thought it was this like mythical evil spirit that they've probably heard of, you know. um so the kids were in such shock that they could not speak to this being. They didn't ever vocalize to the being itself. They just kind of stared at it quietly. And so this being started to communicate to them through their thoughts. These kids described that they all of a sudden have these thoughts appear in their head that weren't there before, and they weren't thinking about it. As so they start hearing these thoughts in their heads as they're looking at these beings. And this being told them that they need to take care of the planet and that technology was headed into a bad direction, and warning that something was going to happen unless humanity changed.
Ugh.
Yeah. Which makes sense to communicate that to children. It really does make sense, you know? Like, who else can make a change in the future? You know, this is going to be like, these children are adults now. you
Right.
know.
That's true. Yeah.
After the children received this message, the craft faded away and disappeared. The entire encounter lasted less than 15 minutes. So the children went back to the school and they told their teachers what they saw. Most of the teachers obviously didn't believe them and they dismissed the accounts. Uh, and the school day went on as normal. When the kids went home, they went to tell their parents, and some of the parents were as skeptical as the teachers, but a few of the parents actually went down to the landing site to investigate. So one child and their mother found where the craft had landed and that all the insects in the area were dead, and there was a big black mark left behind like something had caught on fire. So the ZBC and the BBC were still asking for accounts from the 14th sighting, and someone called in and reported about the aerial school sighting. This got the attention of Tim Leach, the BBC's correspondent in Zimbabwe, and he reached out to friend Cynthia Hind, who I mentioned earlier. She was a researcher and author on UFOs, a field investigator, and Zimbabwe representative for MUFON. And MUFON, if you don't know, is Mutual UFO Network. And she was an editor for her own periodical called UFO Afro News, which was like a small, I wouldn't say small. That's like, it's a little, her own little, report on UFO sightings in Africa. So Tim Leach, he actually goes to visit the school on September 19th to film interviews of the pupils and staff. After investigating this incident, Leach claimed, "I could handle a war zone, but I could not handle this." So Hind also visited the school on September 20th, 1994. She interviewed some of the children and asked them to draw pictures of what they'd seen. She reported that the children all told the same story. And you can find these pictures and you can find these videos online, and these kids, they are all, yes, she's interviewing them as a group, but they are all saying the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
So Cynthia also interviewed the woman who ran the tuck shop, and a few students and the school's headmaster, who was incredibly skeptical. But he was also the one who suggested that the kids drop what they witnessed. The 60 kids did their drawings, and Tim Leach would go and record and interview them. They even went to the site and found the oval-shaped impression and wedge-shaped impressions. So Cynthia Hind also reached out to Harvard University professor of psychiatry, John Mack, who wrote, a book about these abductions. That November, John Mack visited. Oh, sorry. So Cynthia Hind she also reached out to Harvard University's professor of psychiatry, John Mack. And that November, John Mack visited the school to interview witnesses. Now, I will say one good thing, though, about this as well is that, these people are very delicate in talking to these kids, because these kids also, they experienced a trauma through this. And so they are very delicate in talking to the kids and asking them about their feelings and kind of helping them, process through it and believing them, and not dismissing them. So when you watch the interviews, you'll see a lot of that, which is actually really nice. So according to the interviews of Hind, Leach, and Mack, 62 children between the age of 6 and 12 claimed to have seen at least one UFO. Dozens more children who were present stated that they had not seen any UFO or anything unusual. The basic details of the sightings were quite consistent, although not all the details were the same. One or more silver objects, usually described as discs, appeared in the sky. They floated down to a field of brush, and small trees just outside of the school property. Between 1 and 4 creatures with big eyes and dressed all in black exited the craft and approached the children. At this point, many of the children ran, but some, mostly older pupils, stayed and watched the approach. According to Mac's interviews, the creature or creatures then telepathically communicated with the children an environmental message before returning to the craft and flying away. According to Dunning, this telepathic message aspect of the story was not included in Hind or Leach's report, only Mac's, although Hind reported it later. In Mac's interview, one fifth grader tells how he was warned about something that's going to happen and that pollution mustn't be. An 11-year-old girl told Mac, "I think they want people to know that we're actually making harm on this world and that we mustn't get too technologed is what she says." Okay. So I get it. So one child said that he was told that the world would end because they were not taking care of the planet. The children were adamant that they had not seen a plane. High noted that different cultural backgrounds of the children gave rise to the different interpretations of what they had seen, and they did not all believe that they had seen an extraterrestrial. Like I said, some of them thought they saw this Tokoloshe.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2007, a UFO researcher, Randall Nickerson, made a documentary about the event. He even went back and interviewed the children now as adults. It came out in 2022. It can be found only on their website. And I think it's called The Aerial Phenomenon is what the documentary is called. So their claims of their account have not changed and still maintain as what they saw was real and true. So even to this day, where these kids are adults, they still fully 100% believe what they saw, and their stories have not changed. So
crazy.
So, what was it? What did they experience? Like, was it mass hysteria, which we have talked about before on Hollywood's Haunted. And, maybe we'll get more into that later on. But that can happen where people have a mixed or a joint hallucination altogether. These are children. So, their imagination can be pretty wild. Like, I remember as a kid imagining things that seemed very real, but it's hard to say, like, why though? That's the big question. Why would they all hallucinate this at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. And if it was like a prank or something, there would eventually be a crack in the stories.
Yeah. Some kid would say
they're kids. Yeah.
So and so made this up.
Exactly, yeah. Because it's not like that serious.
But, if we're really going to get into, mass hysteria, we could talk about the Children's Hour or the Crucible, if we're really going to get into that, where these are dramatizations, as well, not reality. This is reality. Do kids really act that way in real life?
That's true.
So it's pretty interesting. I really suggest you go out and look up these interviews of these kids and look more into the story. If you can, check out the 2022 or the 2007 documentary that came out in 2022 that Randall Nickerson put together, The Aerial Phenomenon. I have not been able to watch it yet, but it's a little pricey. Yeah, can't explain it. It is definitely weird. So hope you all enjoyed that weird story. And I'm hoping to do a lot more on UFOs and, cryptids and, weird extraterrestrial encounters. That's definitely the direction I want to go with this podcast. So if you like that, please let me know. But yeah, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends about this. Watch my TikToks because I like making them. And feel free to email us at myweirdlittlepodcast@gmail.com. And these should be up on YouTube at some point. So if you want to see what we look like, there's that. But I hope you all have a great rest of your day and stay spooky.